This is part 11 of this complete front-end development course that we are working on, and in this part of the video we are going to build a React container and also some of the foundational React components that will be used throughout all of the components that we will build in the future. Okay, so in order to build this container component, we'll first build this container component and then we'll write a test for this container component using Cypress. So let's go ahead let's go to packages core src components, and inside that components there should already be two components, layout and typography component, that we built in the last videos. So let's create a new folder called container, and inside this container folder I'm going to create two files, container.tsx. Okay, that is the container, and also let's create a test file called container.spec.tsx. okay, so let's go ahead and write this container component. So we will import React as always, and also don't forget to import the forward ref, okay, because we talked about this in the previous videos, why we need to wrap everything with forward ref. So import forward ref from React, and let's also import styled from style components. And let's also import our system props, okay, that we wrote in the utils package. Import with system props. That's the higher order component, and I have not yet fixed this yet, but let's import that from Mod.js utils. Okay, I don't know why it auto completes to that, but let's define a TypeScript interface. Mod container props. There is an error here. With system props is declared, but its value is never read. Cannot find Mod.js utils or its corresponding type declarations. We will fix this, but let's go ahead and keep writing this container component. Okay, this extends from react.html attributes, and this container component will basically just be a HTML div. Okay, HTML div element. Let's define some types for the container. So the container will take children, and there'll be optional react.react node. That'll be the type of the children. Let's also define or specify ref like we always do in all our components. React.ref HTML element, and that should not be in parentheses there. Okay, since we have already, that's okay. So, and let's also specify another property called fluid. Okay, and this will take a boolean value, and like always we'll do const forward props, because we want to send the children to the DOM, we want to send the ref to the DOM, but we do not want this property, this fluid, because it is not a valid HTML attribute. That's why we do not want to send it to the DOM. Okay, that's why we should not forward this kind of props like fluid or any other properties. We discussed this in previous videos. Go and watch that, okay, if you are wondering what we are doing here. So prop string, and this should not forward the fluid property. Okay, includes prop, that should only be prop. Okay, and let's define the mod container is equals to style dot. This container will render a HTML div element, and because we have that forward props defined, we also need to define the configuration for it, or specify the configuration. So we'll do should forward prop forward props, and pass prop in there. Okay, just prop, not props. And let's specify the type for this mod container. That will be mod container props. Okay. So now let's write some styles for this. So for how a container would work is I have a simple web page here. Okay, so this is the basically the document is inside, but everything that you see in the middle here, the main content under React Container API, the main content, this is all wrapped in a container. Okay, and these on the left and right, these are side navigation, but this main content that you see in the middle is wrapped in a container. Okay, so in order to verify that, let me inspect this whole div here. You see the container mod class equals to container mod container, and there are some style components classes. Okay, and you can see that everything from the top to the bottom is wrapped in a container. And when we pass, or when we enable the user to supply the fluid property as true or false, we will need to do this, because if we don't, what happens, let's say that if I'm browsing this web page on a large screen. Okay, right now I'm on a 32-inch monitor. The dimension is 3440. That's the width. So in large screen like this, you can see that the container, the main container, is aligned in the center of the screen. Okay, and we have added some padding. So this is basically setting the fluid property. So that's why we want the content to be in the center no matter how large the screen size is. Okay, and the side navigations can still be on the side, but the main content should always be on the center no matter how big, how large the screen size is. Okay, and if I just, that is too small, so let me try to make it a little big here, and you can see that this is super responsive. Okay, and as I go above certain value here, so let's say 3500, you can see that the container is aligned right in the center. Okay, so that it's easier, really easier to read even on larger screens. So let's come back here and let's write some styles for that. Okay, so since our container takes a property called fluid, so let's write some styles based on whether fluid is true or false. Okay, so if the user supplies the fluid property to be false, then we can write props dot, if not props dot fluid. If props dot fluid is false, then we'll go and write, we'll specify the max width to be 1280 pixels. So this is for screen size less than or equals to 1280 pixels, but also screen size greater than or equals to 768 pixels, that will write shortly. But the max width property, let's set that to 1280 pixels. Okay, so what happens is if the screen size is greater than 1280 pixels, then as I stated earlier, the content, the main container, the container will be centered on the screen. Okay, for screen sizes greater than 1280 pixels. So that's the max width. Let's also specify margin 0, margin auto, so that will just basically center the container. Let's specify padding right. If the props, if the fluid is false, then we want the padding right, or I want the padding right to be 80 pixels. I think that's a reasonable value there. Padding left also will be 80 pixels. And let's specify the media max width. So on screen size less than or equals to 1280 pixels, we'll specify some styles here. So we'll specify padding right. We will decrease the padding. Let that be 48 pixels, and padding left also 48 pixels. Okay. So that's for the screen size max width of 1280 pixels. Let's not forget the unit there. These are all in pixels. And let's also specify media max width. If the max width is 768 pixels, or for screen size less than or equals to 768 pixels, we do not want the padding of 80 pixels or 48 pixels. We want the low padding on the right and left. So padding right can be 8 pixels, and padding left can also be 8 pixels. Okay, so that's for the fluid. And all this padding here, you can see again, if I am on a screen size less than, let me make that a little bigger. If I'm on a screen size less than 768 pixels on 644 pixels, you can see that the main container padding right and padding left is 8 pixels. Okay, see, 8 pixels, 8 pixels. On screen size is larger than 1280 pixels. You can see that the padding right and padding left right here is 80 pixels, 80 pixels. Okay, on screen size less than 1280 pixels but greater than 768 pixels, you can see that the padding is 48 pixels, 48 pixels on the right and left. Okay, so that's for the fluid. Let's do the same thing for the container that is fluid. Okay, that the top one here was not fluid because we have an exclamation mark there, but let's write some styles for if the user supplies the fluid to be true, then we'll apply some different styles for it. Okay, so props dot fluid, and let's specify padding right to be 16 pixels and padding left to also be 16 pixels. Okay, so that's the styles for the mod container. Now let's finally write the container component. Const container is equals to, this will take children, and this will also take fluid and any other props that the user wants to supply. And the types for this container component are defined in mod container props that we defined above here. Put comma, and let's never forget the ref, because we want the users to using this container component to supply their ref value so that they can manipulate the container component. HTML element, let me not that, and let's return mod container that we defined above and wrote styles to it. Let's re-enter children, and in this mod container we will first take any props that the user wants to supply. We'll also provide the ref and fluid. So we'll need to provide, because we have specified the fluid property to be Boolean, we would want to apply some of the we would want to apply a default fluid value. Okay, so for all the components that we write, if there's any properties or any custom properties, we will always want to supply a default value. Okay, so in this case, if for fluid, if the fluid is supplied by the user is true, then they'll just be true, whatever the user supplies. But if it is false, and let me put that in a braces there. So if the user supplied fluid value is true, then it'll be true, else the default should be false. Okay, and let's put 3 equals to there. So that, and then let's export this container component. Okay, export default container. So now let's look at what the error is here before we jump into writing test for this. And of course, don't forget to supply the with system props higher order component and also the forward ref. Okay, I almost forgot that there. Forward ref. And there is an error here with system props from mod.js utils. Could not find module or its corresponding. This one because this is basically not finding, this error comes in when TypeScript cannot find the declaration files for mod.js utils, and this error comes because maybe in package JSON here we have not specified the correct types for this, but we will eventually fix this. We do not want this error, but let's go to package.json here quick in order to debug that error. So build types src index.d.ts, that looks good. The types path looks good. Build types src index.d.ts, that looks also good. Okay, let's leave this to let's leave this error. That is not going to cause any problems. Okay, but we'll eventually fix this. This error should not be there, but let's just focus on this container component first. Props is declared, but its value is never read. So forward prop, this should only be prop here, and this should not be props, that should only be prop there. Okay, so that is fixed. So now let's go and write a test for this. Okay, so container.spec.tsx. For this one, I did a video about complete guide to software testing, where we talked about what needs to be tested and when does something need to be tested. So in this case, because we are applying certain styles based on the fluid value that is applied by the user. So if the user supplies the fluid to be false, then we will apply these styles. If the user supplies the fluid to be true, then we'll supply these styles. And we do need to check for this, okay, because we are conditionally applying something. That's why it's always best to check whether correct styles have been applied or not based on the fluid value that is passed to the container. Okay, so in container spec, and there are other tests that we wrote in the layout component in the last videos, and also typography component in the last videos. So these, because I'm not going to write all these tests here, like for props, these tests should be in every single components. System props and global styles, this should be in every component that we write. Okay, but just for the video, I'm not going to go and write that all over again. I'm only going to write new test, okay, because we already did that. But if you are looking for the spec file, go to GitHub and find the source code over there, okay, and you can just copy paste or review or whatever you want to do. But I do not want to repeat myself here, so I'm just going to only write new test. Okay, so let's go ahead and write test for this container component. So let's import React from React, and let's import mod theme provider, because everything should be wrapped in a theme. I'll just import mod light theme. Okay, and this is not the mod.js utils, and this again, maybe that is happening, that auto completion is happening because it cannot find the correct type. Okay, that's what I'm thinking that it is doing. But let's import the container also. Import container, and let's also import typography so that we can see text inside the container, so that we know the container is working properly. So let's import typography. Okay, so let's describe container, and I'm going to describe now the context here called render, because this will render different container, fluid or not fluid container. So let's check for a fluid container first. So it should render a fluid container. Okay, and for a fluid container, let's mount that container component first. Side.mount. Let's provide mod theme provider that we wrote in the utils package. Okay, go and watch that. If you're wondering where does this mod theme provider comes from, you will need to watch the previous videos. Okay, this is a complete playlist, and one thing is dependent on the other. Okay, Well, not completely, because every single component that we'll be writing will be in complete isolation. We'll be testing that in complete isolation, but there are some things that are dependent, okay? So for this container component and some of the other foundational component that we'll be writing in this particular video, those components will be used throughout all other components that will be, all other complex components that we'll be building soon in the future, okay? So theme, let's provide mod light theme, because I've imported mod light theme there. And let's also do layout. Did I import layout? I did not import layout, because layout is absolutely needed, because that's what provides the theme. Okay, import layout. Let's import that. And inside layout, let's finally use that container, and let's apply the fluid property. Okay, let's first check for fluid. When fluid is true, if the user supplies the fluid to be true, then we'll just re-enter some text there. Okay, I'll just re-enter hello world. So that's that. Okay, and that will re-enter a container, but let's write a test for this. Okay, because if the fluid is true, then we have specified that the container should have the CSS properties, padding right of 16 pixels and padding left of 16 pixels. So we do need to check for this. Okay, and the way to check for this is sci.get, and I do not believe that we wrote a test ID for this container. Okay, so let's go ahead and specify the data dash test. Okay, and this is the naming convention without ID. Okay, for all the major components, the main component will have only data test, and let's say that inside the container, if we are using a box component or typographic component, then the naming convention will be data dash test ID. Okay, but since we are testing for the container component, that is the major container, we will just specify data test and specify that to be container. Okay, so sci.get and data dash test ID is equals to container, and it would be better to write a custom command instead of this complex syntax here, but this is the Cypress syntax. I would like to stick to this, and also so let's do that data test container. Okay, and I forgot what I was saying there, but the container should exist. Okay, and it should also have those CSS properties. Okay, that is the padding right and padding left. So have dot CSS, and the values are padding right. Put that in a quote or a single quote. Padding right will be 16 pixels. Okay, and it should also have .css. It should have padding left of 16 pixels. Okay, because if the fluid is true, again, come back to the container. If the fluid is true, okay, padding right is 16 pixels, padding left is 16 pixels. That's what we are testing here. Okay, so that's the test for the fluid container. Let's open up Cypress. So npm run test. What was that? Npm run test core. Okay, we already wrote scripts for this. Go and watch my previous videos. We already optimized the development environment. Why is it saying configuration files? I think I clicked on the wrong button there. But this is not end-to-end testing. This is component testing. So let me click on component testing, which is already configured. Go and watch my previous videos. Okay, we set up the development environment. That's why it took 4.5 hours about, I think. But that's why our development environment is so smooth. But it is saying cannot find mod.js utils. Okay, that is throwing an error. So let's go ahead and fix this. Okay, right over here, cannot find mod.js utils or its corresponding type. Oh, okay, so yeah, this is not only not finding the declaration, it is actually not finding the entire package. I was over yeah, it is not finding the package itself. It is not just the declaration, but it is not finding the entire package. So I will debug this, and I will, because I not want to sit here spend time debugging, especially on the video, because I not want the video to be long. But I will debug this, and I will be right back. Okay. So I am back. I made a typo there because this mod.js utils, remember I changed the package name, and in your case it will be not mod.js, it will be whatever your scope name is, okay? But my scope name is mod.js-util, okay? Let's specify mod.js-util, and then they'll fix it because that's the scope name, okay? Same over here. That was just a stupid error from my site. So now let's run test core, and let's see our container component, okay, that we render as a fluid container. So this does render a fluid container, but the test is running. It is giving us an error. Try find data test ID container, but never found it. So container data test ID container. Let's go ahead and build this, okay? That's why maybe it is not finding it. So let's go ahead and build the core. Every single time we build a new component, we'll need to build it. Okay, so npm run build core. This is already an optimized script that we already wrote. Now let's go back and then run this test again. Well, that is not going to do anything, but maybe it is a simple typo here. Container data test is equals to container, and this is not data test ID. This should only be data test equals to container, okay? So now they'll fix it. The container, all the tests pass, or there was only one test, so that passed. But because this is fluid, no matter how big, can I do that here? I am not sure if I can do that here. Let me make this smaller, and then, well, I cannot do that here, but I'll need to change the viewport. Let's go ahead and change the viewport to see that it is actually a fluid container. So instead of 769 pixels in cypress.config.ts, let's specify that to be maybe 3500 pixels, okay? And see how it looks. So see, there's a small text there. Let me zoom in if I can. Well, that does not do anything, but you see that whenever the fluid is true, it is not going to have a big spacing on the right and left, and you see this hello world text completely on the left hand side, okay? So that was the fluid container. Let's revert this back to 769 pixels because that's the viewport I want to test my components on. So that's for the fluid container. Let's also write a test for the not fluid container, okay? So it should render a not fluid container for screen larger than 1280 pixels, okay? And let's just copy and paste this mount here. Side.mount, let's mount that container. And then if the user supplied fluid value is false, and for a screen size larger than 1280 pixels, we will basically check for all the CSS values here, okay? CSS properties. So let's get the data test ID, or data test, not data test ID. That's only data test because that's my naming convention, but data test is equals to container. Let's now wrap that in quote. I don't believe it matters even if you wrap that in a quote, but just to be consistent here throughout the code, should, let's first check for should exist, okay? That should always exist, we know that. And it should have .css. Again, it should have CSS max width of 1280 pixels, okay? So we are basically checking for this. Again, we are basically checking for all the styles here, okay? If the container is not fluid. Let's set that fluid to false also. and have CSS padding left should be 80 pixels that we specified, and have CSS padding right to also be 80 pixels. Okay, so let's save that and let's run this test here. To exist render a fluid container for screen larger than 1280 pixels, container fluid. Let's only run this test using only. This is only going to run this particular test case here. So there is still an error to exist in the DOM to have CSS property max width. I made a typo there. So max width container data dash test is equals to container, and it is still giving an error to exist in the DOM with the value 1280 pixels, but the value was 48 pixels. To have CSS padding left with the value 80 pixels, but the value was 48 pixels. And of course this depends on the viewport here, okay? Because our viewport size is 769 pixels, so if we change the viewport larger than 1280 pixels, so let's go ahead and do that and then see let's do 1285 pixels and then see what Cypress does here. Okay, let's refresh that. You can see that larger screen size, because this viewport size, these styles are dependent on the size of the screen. In the case of Cypress, it's dependent on the size of the viewport. Okay, so if you are having an error where it cannot find certain container, it's because of the viewport size. Okay, because the original size was 769. Now that the test case passed, let me revert back to 769 pixels. Okay, so this also passed. Let's remove that only. Every single test file we write, we want to check before we finalize on the test files. We want to find the keyword only, okay? Because we do not want the only keyword in when we are deploying the when it's supposed to be used in production, okay? Be extremely careful of that, because none of your tests will run if you have the only property there. It's extremely important that you do that, okay? Because there's no point in writing a test if you are using only in a production environment. Okay, so to render a not fluid container, this is now the test for screen size between 769 pixels and 1279 pixels. Okay, so you know what, Cypress has something called site.viewport, so let's use that. Instead of changing our configuration file, we can change this viewport in each of the file size, okay, in each of these test cases. So let's do that here also, site.viewport, and specify the value to be 1285 greater than 1280, and also specify the height to be let's just do 800. Okay, and same over here, let's specify the viewport to be 800, and the height can also be 800, doesn't matter. Okay, now let's copy this. So that looks good. Fluid is false, looks good. Even if we don't provide fluid, that always defaults to false. Okay, we do not really need to provide that value there, because fluid by default is false. Okay, and let's get that container component again. So data dash test is equals to container dot should exist dot, and it should have CSS value of, what was that, 768 pixels, no, 1280 pixels, max of 1280 pixels. It should have 48 pixels. Okay, have CSS 48 pixels. That should be a padding right property. Okay, padding right of 48 pixels, and also padding left dot and have CSS. I keep forgetting the single quote there. Padding left is again 48 pixels. Okay, so let's save that, and then let's run only this test here. I'm going to keep that open just so that I don't forget that only keyword there. Okay, again, data test ID is equals to container to exist in the DOM. Again, this is the viewport error. So what happened? First screen size is between 769 pixels and 1279 pixels. The side.viewport is set to 800. Is that actually doing it? It is setting the viewport. So data test is equals to container. Again, there shouldn't be code here. We could create a simple or custom command in Cypress instead of writing this square bracket, opening square bracket, closing square bracket, and then this a little like harder to read syntax. But that is the syntax of Cypress, but Cypress also has the ability to create a custom command. Maybe we'll do that in the future, but for now I just want to stick to this. So let me save that and then see that the test case pass. Okay, so now let's, and there are other test cases for this. Again, either go to GitHub or go watch my previous videos about all the other test cases that we wrote. Okay, especially for these inline styles, for these inlines, for these styles and props. These test cases should be in every single component. Okay, but I do not want to repeat myself. But when I push this code to GitHub, you can go to GitHub and then review the code there, or copy and paste those tests there. Okay, but for now, these are the 3 unique test cases for this container. So let's run everything all at once again. Everything looks good. Everything is working fine over there. Okay, so that is the container component. And I was thinking to build some of the other foundational components in this video, but I will make a separate video about that so that it's easier to find. Like there are other components like box, just simple components that will be used throughout the other components, but for now those components will be simple, but as we go on, those components will be complex, more and more complex. Okay, but for now let's wrap up this container component, and in the next video we will build some of the foundational components, and after that, after we build the foundational components, we will build the more complex, the actual very impressive components. Okay, so I will see you in the next one. See ya.